see you in the land of Mordor. Death awaits you at the border. Pass on through the gates of fun. Destroy the ring of power and wonder.
Hey Middle-earth fans, Roman Daisel here, looking at Iron Crown Enterprises' next campaign module, number 3500 in the series, called Ents of Fangorn Forest. This time you get to go to the forest called Fangorn, bordered on the east of the Wold, on the west by the high peaks of the southern Misty Mountains, and you get to meet the Ents, a strange and fascinating race. You get to explore Durdingle, site of the Entmoots, Welling Hall, home of Treebeard, and the Fortress of Tir Limelight. Now I have to admit this is probably my least favorite campaign module, as not much ever happens around Fangorn Forest. It's kind of like a forgotten part of Middle-earth, and the Ents are more or less out of the history of Middle-earth Rev until the War of the Ring. Those who don't know, Fangorn Forest is right here, just to the north of Rohan, southwest of Isengard, and there's the Wold right there. So it's not really in the mainstream of anything, and it makes it kind of a boring module, but you do get to learn a little bit more about the Ents. This is a 1987 book edition, and I think I paid 20 bucks for it back in 1989 at Endless Adventure, and it does come with 4 full color maps. So you do get a pretty cool map. This does connect with the Isengard map and the Rohan maps. You can piece them together. They more or less lay over top of each other, and you get a bit more of each side. And then the other 2 maps are of Lorien, which I don't know why they have Lorien, and of the Wold itself. For some reason the Wold map doesn't quite connect with the main map. It's off by a lot, and it would have been better had they connected these 2 maps and gone right down to the Emyn Muil and the Falls of the Rorus, because then you could track the entire journey of the 3 hunters chasing the Uruk-hai with Merry and Pippin all the way from the Falls of the Rorus, the Emyn Muil, into the Wold and up to Fangorn. Now on the other side of the map, you get the town of Tir Limelight, which was a Gondorian border town in the area of the Wold when it was Calenarden. So they're going back to the Gondorian era of 1640. That's when these books are usually put out. And the other fold-out map just gives you a listing of what's in the area. So here they have Tir Limelight is at the North Undeeps. Now for some reason they didn't mention this in Lord of the Rings itself, but it is mentioned in the appendices and in Unfinished Tales, how there are 2 Undeeps, or 2 fords across the Anduin in the Wold itself. Aragorn and the Fellowship of the Ring, they came out of Lorien. They followed the Anduin, past the Undeeps into the Brownlands, to the South Undeeps, and then to the Emyn Muil. And Gondor did fortify the Undeeps at one time. Now let's get into the campaign module. We won't go through the first sections because they're just your typical stuff. Adapting the campaign, converting stats, yeah. So you get a brief overview and a timeline of the Second Age. And Ice gives a brief timeline that's not really canon. They say 1300 of the Second Age. Treebeard relocates to what will become Fangorn Forest and takes up permanent residence there, bringing many Ents and Entwise with him. In 1620 of the Second Age, Skinbark brings a large number of Entfolk to live in the higher altitudes of Fangorn. 1760, Leaflock relocates his people to Fangorn. 2500, the Entwives cross the Anduin and make a garden paradise, from which will later be called the Brownlands. They teach men of the area much about agriculture. And then 34-35 of the Second Age, the Battle of Daggerlad rages and the Entwives are lost. And so by the Third Age, the Ents discover the Entwives are missing and search for them for the next 3 centuries, sporadically after that. So not much else happens after that. It says 1052, Tir Limelight is built. And it talks about the Great Plague and the slow decline of Calenarden and the fall. It mentions the Balcoth invasion, in which Errol the Young rides to the rescue of Gondor and Calenarden, and is given the province of Calenarden as his new home and called Rohan. So that's about it. And then you get to the War of the Ring, where the Ents finally wake up and attack Isengard. So there's not much history there for the Ents themselves. It's pretty basic. It goes into a description of the Ents and their brief history from the First Age. Ents were more prominent, I think, in the First Age. They're really first mentioned in battle at when the dwarves of Nogrod sack Doriath after Thingol was murdered as he tried to put a Silmaril into a certain necklace called the Nagalimmer. I can't pronounce it right now because I don't have the book in front of me. But he tried to meld the two things together, and the dwarves got greedy, tried to ask for more payment. He refused to pay. The dwarves murdered him. Then they tried to get away, but the elves came back, killed most of the dwarves, but a few got away. Went to Nogrod, told their side of the story. Nogrod went and sacked Thingol's palace in Doriath. On their way back, laden with treasure, the dwarves were crossing into what was called Assyrianland at the time, and they were attacked by elves and Ents. And they were all destroyed. So the Ents were definitely there. Galadriel talks about meeting Fangorn in the Willow Meads of Tasmarine, and eventually talks about and then we go into the Entwives. The Entwives were different. Ents were more like trees, like the big trees, pines, oaks, and all that stuff. Well, Entwives were more like apple, pear. They were fruit trees. Kind of makes sense. Goes into the cultural and social structure, worship, daily life, magic, Ent-draughts. So they give different types of draughts, nut and herb. Homes, section 4, we're going into the Fangorn, the land, the climate, the flora. Nothing too special there. The fauna, the borders of Fangorn, goes into that. So this is where Iron Crown fills in a lot of gaps that Tolkien never really bothers with. Then we get into the politics and power, section 5, the inhabitants. So Treebeard is the eldest. So he's the oldest living being in Middle-earth, with the exception of the present Maiar. So the Istari, Sauron, Tom Bombadil, and the Balrog. He's even older than Galadriel, but probably not by much, as Galadriel was born in the Blessed Realm during the height of the two trees. So we don't really know when Fangorn was actually born, but she does call him eldest. Then we got Skinbark and Leaflock, two of the other oldest Ents left living. Gives a description of the Huorns, which were trees that can move but can't speak. They're almost Entish, but not quite. Makes me wonder if C.S. Lewis got the idea of his walking trees from Tolkien. You get the Chronicles of Narnia. Then we get Tolwen, who's an elf she's just an NPC character from the First Age, and gives her a backstory. She's not a real figure in Tolkien's lore. She's just made up. Then it gives a timeline of Fangorn at TA 2759 to the War of the Ring, and then Fangorn after the War of the Ring. More politics and power on the borders. You got the inhabitants, so the Kalanardans, so the Gondorians. This is where you get Tur Limlit, or Tur Limlight, and it's basically just the Gondorian garrison at the North Undeeps, and how there are orcs in the Wold. Which makes sense. There would be orcs trying to establish themselves in the Wold, and Sauron would definitely have tried to establish a presence behind Gondorian lines. Talks about how the Kalanardans live. A price table. You get another Gondorian ranger, Dindal, who's an NPC. Now, the orc tribe in the area is called the Bars Thurgrim, and they're basically just implants from the southern Misty Mountains. It does mention the Sylvan Elves in the Lorien Kingdom, and we go to the borders from TA 640 to 319. So there's not really much. There's not a lot happens down this way. The sites of interest are Durdingle, which is where the Entmoot lies, Welling Hall, and it gives a layout of Welling Hall as described in Tolkien's book. Then we have Falls of the Mist, and I guess in the Falls of the Mist you can find some stuff. Tolwen's home, which is a location just inside Fangorn Forest. And then sites of interest on the borders, which would be Ongashur, the home of the orcs, or its outpost, sorry. Then you have a description of Tur Limlight, the town. There would have been a town, because it is a training area, because boats coming from the north, from the Eothram in the north, during their time period, or from the plains of Rovania and the East Bight, depending what time period you're using. So it is a description of the town and the dock district, as well as the fortress. Goes into a bandit's hold. So bandits living in the wool wouldn't be too far-fetched. You could definitely do that. And finally, you get the Caverns of Pain, which is the main orc hold in the region. Has a dungeon layout, a lookout level, and a mine layout. Suggested adventures, so selecting an adventure, so choosing a time period. So we got the Bandits of the Barrow, which would be in the Wold in 1640. Raid on Tur Limlight, so orcs would be raiding. The Rescue of Sharpleaf, Ent Excursion, Treasures of the Falls of Mist, and into the Caverns of Pain. We never really tried any of these except for a raid on Tur Limlight, trying to exterminate the orcs, find out where they are. It's not exactly a book that we used a lot. The Master Military Table, which I liked, Tur Limelight is just a minor outpost. There's only like, they only have like 39 soldiers manning the post, counting the officers. Fangorn, there's only like 150 Ents and maybe 2,000 Hjorns. The orcs in the area outnumber everything. There's 2 main orc tribes. And then the master NPC charts, encounter table, and master animal table. So, as well as a weather table. So overall, this is probably the most boring campaign module. It's not my favorite. I do like all the backstories they put in for the Ents and the end care tables. Nothing really happens. The best thing you can do is have Tur Limelight as a border fortress trying to hold back the Balkoth when they come through, because the Rohirrim didn't fortify the Anduin that far up, relying more on horse scouts to warn them before anything came across, of anything coming out of the Wold. The adventures aren't that great in this, and it's just not an area that's anything really happens. You could play a War of the Ring though, with the Ents marching from Wellinghall all the way to Isengard. So it does work well with the Isengard book, the Rohan campaign book, and the map of course helps link everything together. But yeah, it's definitely my least favorite campaign module so far. And anyone who's ever played this has this module and played with it, let me know what you guys thought of it, and if you were able to incorporate it much better than I could. Anyway, until next time, this has been Roman Daysel. I'm out of here.